This is Crappy to Happy, and I am your host, Cass Dunn. I'm a clinical and coaching psychologist, a mindfulness meditation teacher, and of course, author of the Crappy to Happy books. In this show, I bring you conversations with interesting, inspiring, intelligent people who are experts in their field and who have something of value to share that will help you feel less crappy and more happy. My guest today is Tracy Otsuka. Tracy is a force of nature, and she's a champion for women whose brains don't operate like most people's. Tracy is a certified ADHD coach, a former attorney, and she is the best-selling author of ADHD for Smartass Women, How to Fall in Love with Your Neurodivergent Brain, a book that is rewriting the narrative about ADHD in women. Tracy doesn't just speak about ADHD in theory, she lives with it, and drawing from her own diagnosis, her years spent coaching thousands of women, and the time and energy that she has invested into her own research, she helps women with ADHD turn what the world calls chaos into creativity, energy, and purpose. Tracy is a firm believer that every woman with a neurodivergent brain has something that makes them brilliant, and that our job is to find out what that brilliance is, and then that is when we live fully, authentically, creatively, and really shine and make a mark on the world. She also hosts the podcast ADHD for Smartass Women, which reaches millions around the world and has become a lifeline for many. Tracy invites every woman who's ever been told she's too much to stop hiding and fall in love with your ADHD brain. Welcome to the Crappy to Happy podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I love your work, Tracy. And for listeners who aren't familiar, you obviously have a very, very popular podcast and a book, both called ADHD for Smartass Women. For listeners who aren't yet familiar with your work, Tracy, do you mind just sharing a little bit of your own backstory, how you came to be doing this work, to be so passionate about it, and even, getting your own ADHD diagnosis?
So my son was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 12. He started to struggle at about 9. And before that, no struggles whatsoever. So we ended up getting him tested. Couldn't find anything, thought it was a visual processing issue. We spent thousands of dollars on training, didn't seem to make a difference at all. He ended up going to a different school. He was at a Catholic school. And then 2 years later, he asked to come back to the Catholic school. And his comment was, this school, it was supposed to teach to interest. So they were all about, the arts and music and things beyond just the regular reading, writing, and arithmetic. And he just felt that there wasn't enough structure. In the Catholic school, there was much more structure. And so he asked to go back to that school. And when he went back to that school, we ultimately had him tested. And when he was tested, they told us he has ADHD. And I almost fell off my chair because I didn't know what ADHD looked like. I thought ADHD meant that you're not very smart, you're all over the place, and you are not going to be successful. So he was 12 now. And so we went to a psychologist in our community who came highly referred, supposedly an expert on ADHD. And she met with us 3 times. The first time, the entire family, then just with Marcus, and then with my husband and me. And that last meeting, she sat us down and she said, your job as his parents is to reduce his expectations so he won't be disappointed in life. I was like, what? I mean, why would you ever say that to any child? I don't care if your child is intellectually disabled. Wherever you put the standard, they're, maybe they'll fall a little bit below it, but let's not put it on the floor to ensure that. And so at that point, I was like, no, we're not going to do this. We never went back. And I started to do the research on ADHD. And it took me about 8 months. I remember reading Ned Hallowell and John Rady's Driven to Distraction. By the second reading, I was on a Stairmaster at the gym. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Marcus got his ADHD from me. But ADHD looks different in women. So,
Mm.
unlike my son, who was very stubborn, and if he wasn't interested in something, he just wouldn't do it, he'd fight everyone. Girls tend to be more people pleasing. And, so they're going to do everything they can, which means work so much harder in order to do as well. And the two things that made me realize that it is ADHD, and he did get it from me, was number one, drivenness is a form of hyperactivity.
Interesting.
I had gone through a lot of school. I'd gone through law school. I'd gone through graduate law school. I'd always been successful in what I did, but I jumped around a lot. I left the practice of law to start a high-end women's wear company where, 60% of our business was our top three, do we call them department stores, but our high-end
Yeah.
luxury department stores. And I made that happen in 8 months. So I would do these crazy things, but if I was really interested in them, I would be able to make them work and make them work really fast. The second thing was many people with ADHD have intuition, really heightened interpersonal intuition. And that means you can walk into a room, not know anyone that's there, and you can literally just feel what's going on. You can feel the energy. And it's not hippy dippy, it's not woo woo. What it is if you can't always rely on your brain, you start to develop your other senses, right?
Yeah.
So, how a person will give you that sideway glance, or how the weather changes, or these little things that you're able to put together and come to conclusions that are actually true, even when the people that might be in that room, number one, don't want you to know, or they don't know themselves. So it was those two things that really made me realize that, oh my gosh, he got it from me. And so then, of course, I was totally into it. And I wanted to learn more about ADHD. And so, initially I started a Facebook group. Pretty quickly, we were at 100,000 members.
Wow.
And then what I really wanted to do was start a podcast. And so I started a podcast. My whole thought was, I'm going to put guardrails on my learning. I might disappoint myself because the thought of doing a podcast every week for someone with an ADHD brain sounds kind of terrifying. And so I decided that if I did a podcast, I would be able to learn with whomever it is that decided to learn with me. And whereas I might disappoint myself, I would never disappoint them. So if I had even one listener where this was making a difference, I would continue to do it. And it's been, I think, 6.5 years now. And then, of course, the book came after that, and my programs and all of it. That was a very long answer.
It's totally fun. I could relate to so much of what you said. When I was in the middle of my master's degree in clinical psychology, the summer break where you get the longer break. And I had a 2-year-old daughter at the time. I was studying psychology full time, and I'll keep it really short.
Please don't.
No, I got interested in veganism. I'd been vegetarian, and I read something about veganism, and I thought, I need to be vegan. I need to at least try to be vegan. So I started to be vegan, and then I went to buy some stuff online, and you couldn't really get good vegan stuff online, and the shipping was terrible, and there was only one online store in Australia, and I thought, there needs to be more online vegan stores in Australia, and who better to start an online vegan store than me? So I did that, and within 6 months,
Yep.
and it was up, running, logo, fully functional. I had my spare room turned into a warehouse. I was running a very successful online vegan store. And meanwhile, I had to go back to uni and finish my master's. And then I got a job as a psychologist and unpacking orders after seeing my clients and picking my daughter up from school. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? And so I just got rid of it. I just sold it and was done with it and walked away from it. But, I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD until about 12 months ago. So I look back at these things now and go, oh,
they all make sense.
Now that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a typical experience, isn't it, of women who go through life. You do these things and you get the degrees and you do the jobs and you feel like, well, I can focus and I can get stuff done. And then, something happens and you realize, and then you look back on everything with such a different perspective once you understand the diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you were doing was constantly firing your dopamine. And I work primarily with very successful women with ADHD. And what we learned early on, many of us were people pleasers. We noticed that, when we do these certain things, we get a lot of attention for them. and it starts with grades in school, right? And so we just work so hard to make sure that we're always producing. And when we produce, we get attention. When we produce, things also start going better, right? Because we're in action, we're actually doing things. So, in fact, I'm going to say that you're at least combined type ADHD, right? You're not inattentive ADHD. And I think the women that really struggle are the women that have inattentive ADHD that are always in their brain and they're always thinking instead of getting into action. Now, there's negatives to both, right? We can get to the point where everything is about producing. And, at some point, it's too much, as you noticed, and something needs to give. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about. And, we can preface this with you're not a doctor and a psychiatrist, but you have so much valuable lived experience from the community that you've created and the women that you've spoken to. And obviously your podcast has been going for such a long time. Like, you really are an expert on the topic of ADHD, particularly for smart, successful women. And I think that even with all of the information, more awareness that there is out there now, I still know from talking to my own community, my own, listeners and clients, that there is still misconceptions out there. There is still a misunderstanding. And even though people will understand conceptually that, women are underdiagnosed because they only ever looked at hyperactivity in boys. Yep. That was the criteria. I mean, I studied psychology. That's what we were taught. But I don't think that there is necessarily a clear understanding of, what does it look like for women? How does it present? What is inattentive? How does hyperactivity look? Can you explain some of that for women who are listening thinking, well, I don't know, is that me? What does it look like in women?
Okay. What I'd love to preface it with, however, is I do not believe that ADHD is a disorder.
No, it's not.
And there was a Canadian study that came out in 2022. I don't know why no one seems to be talking about it. And that study showed that 43% of people with ADHD are in excellent mental health. Wow. I didn't say good mental health. I didn't say okay mental health. I said excellent mental health. And so we need to understand that so much of what we see when people really struggle with ADHD is in large part trauma. And it can be developmental trauma, childhood trauma, but it can also be the trauma of having ADHD, especially if you really struggled in school. So, you go through school, you keep trying so hard and everybody's telling you to try harder. They're giving you this impression that it's a character flaw. You just don't care, and it's not true. And so you just keep trying, but you can't try any harder. So then what do? You just give up. And so then you have learned helplessness, right? Where I can't do it. Tell me what to do. Well, that's the biggest prescription for unhappiness that I know. So please understand that just because you have ADHD does not mean that you can't do amazing things. And I have worked with thousands of women with ADHD, and I will tell you, there is not one of them that I have ever met, ever worked with, ever talked to that wasn't truly brilliant at something. So the key, because we have these interest-driven brains, is to figure out, okay, where's that interest? What am I truly passionate about? Okay, so now, yes, ADHD looks so different in women and girls, which explains why 75% of women and girls remain undiagnosed. The biggest thing is we have 2 times the rate of inattention. So because of that, and I'll explain that, inattentive ADHD looks like, in a woman, the absent-minded professor. Brilliant in her area of interest, but everything else, not so much. So things like taking care of the house, things like, making sure lunch is packed, things like, your car might be a mess, your kids, the administrative paperwork for school, you may forget that.
Picking up your kids from school.
And I have done that, literally forgotten about that. So that would be inattentive ADHD. In a girl, it might look like sitting in the back of the classroom and being off in her own little fantasy world, not even realizing she's in school, let alone that class, until the teacher calls on her. And so, of course, if that's you and you're daydreaming and you don't know what's going on, and then, the teacher calls on you and the other kids are making fun of you, maybe the teacher can be kind of bullying in terms of how she responds to you because she thinks that you're doing it on purpose.
Mm.
No, you're totally bored. And what's so frustrating is there may be things that you do so well because you are interested, but you don't understand that, oh, that's what's going on in my brain. The other form of ADHD, there's three types: hyperactivity, inattentive, and combined type. Most people, honestly, I've never met anyone who was purely hyperactive.
No, I'm combined.
Most people are a combination. And so hyperactivity or the hyperactive form of ADHD, that looks like what you were saying, the traditional boy, right? He's jumping off the wall. He's getting in trouble. He is annoying to the adults around him. So he gets the services versus the girls who tend to be people pleasers, who tend to be very sweet. They're daydreaming in the back of the classroom. They're not really hurting anyone. They're not causing problems. So they don't get diagnosed. But instead, in their brains, they're wondering, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do what all the other students in class can do? And so they tend to get diagnosed with anxiety and depression instead. Anxiety and depression might be comorbid, but often it can also be that if you treat the underlying ADHD, the anxiety and the depression go away. Girls also get diagnosed later in life. They tend to get diagnosed after puberty because what we know now is that estrogen modulates dopamine. So those times in our life when estrogen is bouncing around, those can be the times that we struggle the most. So, of course, puberty, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and then menopause.
I heard somebody say the other day that the hyperactivity, because I'd always heard that the hyperactivity could be mental hyperactivity, just overthinking everything. But then somebody said, what about hyperactivity of the mouth? It's the talk, 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 talk. The one in class, it's always talking. And I thought, oh, of course.
And think about how many girls, I was one of them,
Yeah.
On their report card, it was like, she talks too much. She disturbs the students around her. Tracy could be an excellent student if she would stop talking, but we're bored, right? So we're always looking for dopamine. We're looking for interesting things. And I'm sorry, my neighbor, talking to her was more interesting than listening to the teacher.
So that, I think what you just said then about the hormones is so important, because I know myself that there's, and what I've talked about, what I hear people talking about is this rate of women being diagnosed during perimenopause when hormones are all over the place. And so symptoms that have been there that you may have been able to manage become impossible to manage. But the idea that at puberty, that just went ding, ding, ding in my brain about the girls who do really well in primary school, and then the wheels fall off when they get to high school. And I thought it was just, suddenly there's more homework and there's extra things to do and there's assignments, but you layer in there the hormones exacerbating the symptoms, then again, it makes perfect sense that high school would be challenging. And then university, well, then it was all over for me once I got to university. I had to go back to university way later to actually do well because it wasn't happening for me straight out of school.
And it can be both of those things, right? The hormones, but also school is getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
And so your capacity to maintain everything, becomes less and less. And I remember literally up until 8th grade, and I always wondered, why was this? I could memorize anything. I was the lead in the English speaking plays. I was lead in German speaking plays. I could memorize everything. Once I got to 8th grade, I have no memory of even one chorus of a song. So if it happened after 8th grade, and I always wondered, why could I memorize so well before? And then afterwards, I couldn't memorize at all. So today, if the song, was popular up until 8th grade, I know the song. Like it's literally in my brain. But anything after 8th grade, nope, can't do it.
Yeah, so interesting. And then, you mentioned pregnancy, postpartum as well. And I think if you consider that women haven't been aware or have struggled to get a diagnosis, there's so many of these times in life that because of the life circumstances, we blame that. Is that what happens? Like, oh, well, it's baby brain. It's you're a new mum, you're forgetful. But in fact, if there's ADHD there, then it's going to be exacerbated.
Absolutely. Because you have more responsibilities. Things get a lot less linear, meaning, when you just have to take care of yourself and you just have to, get yourself fed, get your book read for the class. Now you're not only managing your own career, but you're likely managing the whole household. probably managing your husband's social calendar and all that, and you're managing this brand new baby. And honestly, because of sexism and social stereotypes and gender roles, most of this falls on women still, 75% of the care tasks. So it all makes sense that it just becomes too much. And that part actually is serious, because what we know today, research shows that 24% of women diagnosed with ADHD will attempt suicide. So to just
Really?
brush it off and say, oh, it's nothing, that's not true either. So that is 3 times higher than men with ADHD and 8 times higher than women with ADHD.
Okay, this is Cass just jumping in with a quick note on that. What Tracy meant to say was 8 times higher than women without ADHD. So the study she was referring to is a Canadian study by Fuller Thompson, and it reported that women with ADHD are roughly 3 times more likely to attempt suicide at some point in their life than men with ADHD, and 8 times more likely than women who do not have ADHD. So that is, I think, an important clarification, because that was a little confusing. Back to the episode.
So I believe that, this is in large part because of all these extra roles and duties that are stacked on women that aren't stacked on men. I mean, if you think about it, if a man has ADHD and he goes and hires a house cleaner or, a nanny, let's say he's a single guy, nobody would think twice about it. They would literally be like, of course you're going to do that, right? Even if he didn't have ADHD. Versus with women, no, we're supposed to do all the things.
So the work that I do in my coaching work predominantly is around self-confidence and imposter syndrome. I'm really interested in how you see these two things interact, how undiagnosed ADHD in women really potentially contributes to these feelings of self-doubt, low self-confidence, feeling not good enough. What's that relationship? I mean, you must talk to women all the time, so I'd love to get your take on this.
Yeah, no, it is huge. So first of all, if you think about a young woman or a girl who struggles in school, maybe she goes home and her room's a mess and, her parents ask her to do things, she can't get them done. She starts feeling judged. She doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel safe or understood. She certainly doesn't feel good enough. And she feels like nothing she will ever do is good enough. And so she can develop something called rejection sensitive dysphoria. So she becomes really sensitive to rejection and criticism. And so what ends up happening is, I call them mental minefields. All of these things start connecting, so you start developing these perfectionistic tendencies. Because if I'm perfect, then nobody's going to be able to judge me, right? And this comes from this feeling of feeling judged and trying to avoid criticism and rejection. But feeling judged develops into this need to constantly be understood, which means you're always over explaining yourself. You're constantly overthinking everything. You're constantly second guessing yourself. And so you develop these perfectionistic strategies, basically. And so then you're comparing yourself to others, but you're also feeling disappointed by others because you're a perfectionist, right? So they are never going to be able to reach your exacting standards. And then you become really critical of others. Like nothing is ever good enough for you and nothing is ever good enough for them, which really can start to hurt relationships. And it just becomes this 9-legged stool. And what I always say is that if you can knock out just even 2 legs, the whole thing can fall, right? If you can learn, oh my gosh, this all came from my ADHD, right? And it started with these feelings of constantly being criticized and rejected, because we know that kids with ADHD, they hear 20,000 more negative messages by the time they're 12 than a neurotypical child. And so over time, I'm sorry, all those little cuts, that's trauma. And that can add up to one big trauma. And you can understand that if you're constantly like, I'm thinking of, a girl who she just feels so beaten down. And so she just gets smaller. She develops learned helplessness. Boys will be more likely, some girls too, but boys will be more likely to say, screw this. There is nothing I can do that's ever going to be good enough. So I'm rebelling, right?
Yeah.
And then you see a lot of oppositional
So
behavior.
true.
It makes perfect sense though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm working with women and through their whole adult life and career, and they're really successful, but they cannot shake this self-doubt, this feelings that nothing is ever good enough. It goes to their core.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I have women where I will start working with them and they are so broken. But the thing about the ADHD brain, we've always wanted to know why. Why do I feel this way? Why did I do this? Why am I always challenging the status quo? Why can't I just let it lay? Once we realize it's ADHD, we have an explanation, we have a reason. And then we start putting it all together and understanding ourselves, then our life makes sense and our new choices and decisions can serve us instead of always trying to, do everything to make everyone else happy, to make other people comfortable rather than, well, wait a minute. Is this really what I want? I say all the time, I don't believe that ADHD is a productivity issue. I believe that it's an identity issue.
Mm.
You've been doing whatever everybody else has been telling you, not knowing who you are, not knowing what's important to you. And so no wonder you're not successful. Once you know that, though, once you know what it is that you actually value, what's important to you, what your natural strengths are that you're practicing today, every day. Most women, they don't even know, that come to me, they don't even know what that looks like. You know what talents you've built skills around that are actually now your superpowers. Okay, this is a big one. We have so many passions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many interests. We love the bright, shiny, and we try this and we try that. And then we go up and we go down and we're sideways, and we never really complete anything. And so we start to believe that that's just our personality. That's just who we are. And in fact, what you need help with is really understanding who you are so that you can choose the passion that connects to a purpose. Because one of the things about ADHD women is we are so mission driven and we are so justice sensitive. So we can't just pick any passion. We're going to get bored. Might be fun for a while. Spikes our dopamine. No, we need a passion that connects to our purpose. So who are we going to help? It's all about service, whether it's a person or a cause that needs to be intricately bound to what we do so that we're in that sweet spot where all those things, our values, our talents, our skills, our passion and purpose and strengths are in that sweet spot. And so then what happens is when you are constantly working in that sweet spot, you are going to have none of the executive function challenges you have in all the other areas. So that's how you can see a woman who, we struggle usually with the boring, stupid stuff, the administrative stuff. But if you can get yourself through school and then you get out into the world, what are you doing? You're doing stupid administrative stuff. And so then you believe there is nothing that you're brilliant at, when in fact, I believe ADHD women, we are not meant to follow. We are meant to lead, but we need to be leading in an area of interest. And then, oh my gosh, it happens so fast.
Yeah.
Everything flips, and it happens so, it's so easy
Yeah.
rather than constantly trying to push ourselves up a hill, doing this work that we think we're supposed to do, but feeling no joy whatsoever around it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. As you were talking to Tracy, I was thinking, about how in terms of that confidence and feeling like a fraud, and what you feel on the inside doesn't match what you present on the outside, and therefore you constantly feel like, people think I'm smart, but I'm really not, and all of that sort of stuff going on. But also the fact that systems, workplaces, schools are not set up to accommodate ADHD brains.
At
So,
all.
and the reality is that if you have a job, no matter how smart you are, and we can say it's a super, like, lean into your ADHD, but what do you say to women who are trying to make it work in those environments where systems and structures, they don't cater for the difference, right?
They're not at all.
No.
And what I say is environment is everything to us. So you need to figure out what that sweet spot is so that you can start working in that sweet spot. And I know it is scary, but it is never going to get better where you are. you need to change your environment. You need to be around people that see your brilliance, that love and respect you exactly the way you are. And that's career, but it's also relationships,
Yeah.
whether we're talking about intimate relationships or we're talking about friends. We all have, you're a psychologist, you know this. We all have this rudder inside ourselves, right? And that's partly our intuition. And when we are doing things that serve us, we feel good. When we are not, we don't feel good. So if you have relationships with friends where you leave it and you never feel good, those aren't friends. You need to find some new friends
Yeah.
because the most important thing for us is to be around people who get us, who we feel connection is one of the most important things for us.
Yeah.
If we don't feel that sense of connection, it's really hard to get out of bed.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And everything that you're saying, like if you're not around people who get you, that just further fuels those feelings of
Yep.
something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me, and I need to change. So what you're really saying is when you know with that level of self-awareness, when you understand the difference, then you can start actually changing the environment to suit you as opposed to trying to change yourself to fit in with whatever the expectations are
We
around you.
can't.
No.
Yeah. We can't fit in. And
And the trying will make
it
you
is,
miserable and burn you out and make you
oh,
depressed, right?
it totally will.
Right.
It absolutely will. Surprisingly, though, what I've noticed with ADHD women is when they can finally identify who they really are, lights them up, what is so important to them. You know, the work that is important. It's almost like they can't help but change because they have that awareness. And it might be a little tiny change every single day, but when when you finally know where you're brilliant, that alone increases the confidence. And the more you work in that area of your brilliance, the more confident you become.
Yeah.
And so it kind of feeds on itself. And there will always be times, I mean, I'll admit it, where something will happen and I don't struggle with RSD to the level that most women with ADHD do. But I think I don't because I don't have childhood trauma, at least not anything, anything major. I also learned really early on, I was pretty good at school. I figured school out. Yeah, I had to work harder, but I figured it out. And it was those actions that taught me that, okay, you need to do more of this. And so that's what builds the confidence versus for some women with ADHD, if you're constantly in your head, you think that you're actually solving problems, but you're not doing anything. You're like on a rocking horse, right? You're not going forward, you're not going backwards. And what that does to self esteem, well, it certainly doesn't grow it.
No.
So I always say, even the smallest little thing that you can do, but it's got to be something that you want to do for you. There has to be intention behind it. It cannot be something that someone else is telling you to do. I mean, there are things that we have to do that we don't want to do. There are ways to get the ADHD brain to do it, but over time, it can't just be so and so tells me to do this thing, and so I'm going to do it. There has to be something in you that wants it.
You mentioned your foray into the women's fashion, and I mentioned my vegan store. In the communities and all of those thousands of women that you interact with, Tracy, how many of them have an entrepreneurial spirit? How many of them are out doing entrepreneurial things?
Most of them.
Yeah.
Most of them. Even if it's a side hustle.
Right.
It's that level of interest, right? And when we become interested in something, we hyper focus and then it just kind of takes over and we want to do more and more. So I think it's very common. There are some women with ADHD who have no interest at all, and they actually like things. They have learned for their brain, they want everything in systems and structures. And those women, they can be entrepreneurial too, but they actually do really well. Those women usually have a little bit of autism as well, which is very common. So 60% of women with autism also have ADHD, and 40% of women with ADHD also have autism. So I think it's all, it's all these labels,
Yeah.
but I think it's all connected. But those women, you can imagine, so you've got the autism wanting the structure and the discipline and all of that, fighting with the ADHD, which is like, free for all, don't tell me what to do. So those women tend to be very good entrepreneurs because they're able to build the systems and the structures.
Yeah, how interesting. How interesting. I was going to say with that entrepreneurial thing too, I think in my experience, and I'm sure for many women as well, it is a way out of that corporate bureaucracy, like
Absolutely.
that environment that just doesn't work, that doesn't
No.
fit.
No. One of the things I wanted to add that I forgot is when you asked the question about, fitting into the corporate environment, school, whatever, what research shows if you're a parent and you're thinking, oh my gosh, my son or daughter or child has ADHD and they're in the school system and they're not doing well, what research has shown is if they have one parent who is on their side, who is fighting for them, who sees their brilliance, they're going to be okay. And I can say firsthand, from firsthand experience, that I really believe that's true.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times, Tracy, about childhood trauma. Now, again, we're prefacing this, you're not a psychiatrist. For a long time, there were these opposing views about ADHD being purely biological and it's genetic and it's inherited from a parent. And then the other view, which is that it's a manifestation of childhood trauma because trauma, as we know, does affect your brain development. And then there's some that say, well, if you've got ADHD or you've got a predisposition to it, then the trauma is going to exacerbate it. From all of your research and what you have learned, where do you come down on that in terms of the nature-nurture debate about ADHD?
Yeah. So I believe that it's hereditary. You're born with it. The thing about it, though, is the symptoms of ADHD mirror the symptoms of trauma.
Yes.
So what ends up happening, and usually families with trauma, it's very common that one or more of the parents has ADHD, right? So you've got the symptoms of ADHD on top of the symptoms of trauma. And then, of course, then you go into hormones and perimenopause and menopause and those symptoms on top of it, because we know there are studies that have been done on women without ADHD during the normal menstrual cycle. Their brains make less dopamine. All women's brains make less estrogen as they age. So you can see all of these things that, stack on top of each other. So if you have ADHD and then there's also trauma, it's going to be so much worse. And those are the women that struggle the most, in my experience. But even those women, once they understand, oh my gosh, it's ADHD, and they start learning about ADHD, it really makes a difference.
There's so much else that goes into that as well. I mean, you think about ADHD, and particularly if it's undiagnosed, and they're more likely to develop substance use issues, drink too much, shop too much. But drink too much is the big one. And, recreational drugs, they're drawn to or more inclined to develop issues with substances, etc. And again, none of that's very good for an ADHD brain.
No. And I mean, so much of it, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, is we're talking addiction. What are the socially acceptable addictions, right? So
Work.
I'm pretty much a workaholic. The thing is, I love what I do. So it's fun for me, but that's socially acceptable in our society. And what we know with the ADHD brain is we struggle with the reward deficiency loop. So, this is not one of my challenges, but you may think, oh, okay, when I go home, I'm going to have a glass of wine. That glass of wine is going to taste so good. So you go home, you have the glass of wine, you're like, I didn't get the reward that I thought I was going to get. So maybe the second glass of wine. Food's the same way, right?
Yep.
So you have the second glass of wine. Nope. And the third and the fourth. And so you can see how all of these addictions can happen because we're not getting the reward. We're not getting the, the dopamine, the serotonin, all of that. And so my take on it is always, we're going to have these somewhat addictive tendencies. So can you push that into an addiction that is a little bit more socially acceptable, like exercise or work or, I don't know, helicopter parenting or, versus addictions that really physically hurt you, like
Yes.
alcohol and, all kinds of drugs, whether it's prescription or not.
Yeah, totally agree. So when it comes to anybody who has struggled traditionally with standard advice about productivity and time management and all of that stuff, I put both of my hands in the air, and I'm a life coach, and I could never make any of that stuff work for me. So what does work for women and people with ADHD?
Yeah. Okay. Whatever you're trying to do, and there are things that you're going to be so interested in, rabbit hole, you don't even feel like you worked, right? Completely lose track of time, which is part of ADHD. Then there are going to be the things that are more difficult. So, how do you get those difficult things done? You make it fun, you make it challenging, you make it social. Urgency works too. But what we're trying to avoid is the urgency, because that burns out your nervous system.
Yes.
So, for example, I don't know, you commit to yourself that I notice that I feel positive emotion when I walk into the kitchen and it's cleaned. The dishes are washed, first thing in the morning. It pops my dopamine and it makes the rest of the day better. So, how do I go about making sure that I get those dishes washed? Well, the first one is fun. How can you make it fun? Can you put music on and dance, jump around? Can you get the whole family to help with this? Can you listen to a podcast? That's what you get to do while you're washing those dishes. Challenging. This one works for me. I will set a timer on. I'll know that, okay, last time I got it done in 15 minutes. Can I do it in 10 today? Fun, challenging, social. What would be, can you, involve the family? Or can I get on the phone and can I call a friend while I'm washing the dishes? And then we know about urgent, right? Urgent will be, I don't know, your mother-in-law's coming over and the whole, kitchen it's like a bomb hit it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really help you. What helps you is walking into a room and being proud of yourself and saying, oh my gosh, look, this is how I'm starting out my day in positive emotion, instead of walking into the kitchen and beating yourself up because, it looks like a bomb went off.
So working with your natural tendencies, understanding what motivates you is the key, right? I know you talk about this like accepting it, embracing it, and making it work for you, finding things that work for you instead of thinking it's something that needs to be fixed or something. You're never going to be able to do it, and you're never going to be like all the other people who get things done, and all of that sort of stuff, which clearly just makes you feel crap about yourself. You just mentioned about the motivation, but do you have any examples about what it means or what it looks like to lean in to the ADHD?
So, whenever you're diagnosed with ADHD, all you ever hear about is the weaknesses. We are supposed to shore up our weaknesses. Whoever sets the world on fire in their weaknesses, right? We set the world on fire in our strengths. And if you think about what are the strengths of ADHD, creativity. We see things all at the same time that most people will never see. Curiosity. That's why we're so creative, because we're always kind of wondering, well, why and how? And is there a better way to do it? It's also why we can be annoying, because we don't struggle with change, usually. There's ADHD and autism. There can be a little bit of that. But in general, we love things that are new and different and novel. We tend to be lifelong learners. So I don't know about you, but I have friends who, clock in at 9, clock out at 5, been doing that for 20 years, and they'll ride off into the sunset of retirement. I could never do that. My thought is, oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. There's not enough life and there's so much more to live. What could I do more? I can't see myself ever retiring. I will always be building something, right? So I just feel like we are so much more interesting because we've had all these experiences. You have these stories about, oh yeah, I was in grad school and suddenly I decided I was going to open a vegan store. All those experiences, I'm sorry, they make you more interesting than the person who clocks in at 9 and stops at 5 and is in the same job for, I don't know, decades, right?
Yeah.
We are risk takers. So whereas most people would say, you know what, that's because of the impulsivity. Whereas most people, are saying, I don't know, that doesn't sound safe, or it sounds scary, or are you really going to leave law? Are you, versus for us, we don't even really think about it. It's just, we're given so much of the things we've had to struggle with. We are so optimistic, right? And sometimes I meet women that are literally, they've been addicted to meth. They're living in their car and they are still so incredibly hopeful because they know that there's something inside themselves And I hear this from ADHD women all the time. It used to be something that I say to anyone, and that is, we just know we are meant to do big things. We know we are meant to do important things. And so if we are doing the 9 to 5, hating our work every day, it's really taxing on our nervous system, on, our sense of self, on our purpose, because we just know there's something more. But we're scared to even say it out loud, like we're not allowed to feel that way. So I said we were really mission driven. We are highly empathetic. And I think part of that is what's responsible for our intuition. So because of the empathy, we're also really just as sensitive. We can see ourselves, even if we've not experienced that, we can put ourselves in other people's shoes, which we could use a lot more of in this world today. So there is nothing that you could say to me that would ever, okay, look, I don't think ADHD is a gift. I will never say that. Because if I could have all the skills I have now, but also have incredible working memory, I would take that in a heartbeat. But I know that my lack of good working memory has allowed me to develop these other skills. And so I will say I wouldn't give up my ADHD for anyone or anything. I know it is responsible for so much of what I've been able to achieve, but even more than that, like who I am and how I'm able to help people, right? That it's just not enough for me to just do any old job. I need to do work where I know that I'm making a difference. And it's that ripple effect, because you make a difference and then those people tell their people what they've learned, and then they make that ripple effect. And so it's doing good in the world. And I think we don't have enough of that. Did I answer your question? I can't even remember what it was.
I know what I asked, but I've also got sidetracked as well. I was actually asking what productivity tips work for ADHD women. So you're an ADHD coach, right? Now I'm very curious about this. What does an ADHD coach do? Because clearly you're not teaching people time management, or are you? What are you doing?
So most ADHD coaches do. Most ADHD coaches work with clients so that they can become more productive. I don't do any of that. Because, of course, I'm oppositional and I'm always challenging the status quo. So, what I do is the foundational work. I do the identity work. And then once they've got the identity work done, it's going to be so much easier for them to get those things done that they really want to do. What I said before, there are going to be certain areas in your life where you're not going to struggle with the executive functions like you struggle in these other areas. So let's get you pointed in the right area. And then once you understand, we're going to teach you not only who you are, but then how your brain works, because only then can you start building systems and strategies that work for your brain. Because just because we both have ADHD does not mean that I can give you a strategy that works for me and it's necessarily going to work for you. I want to give you my best. Well, I don't know if it's my best strategy, but it's one that has never not worked. Do you use this? It's called a data. It's no longer called Datex. It's called a time cube. Have you ever seen this? Okay. So we struggle to start, right? When we are bored, even when we're not bored, even when it's something we're interested in, sometimes we know that, oh gosh, that's going to be a 3-hour project. I can't start. So we're doing everything not to start. So the beauty of this time cube is it's sitting on my desk. So we struggle to start, but we also struggle to stop, right? Once we get in, then we can't stop. So why don't we take advantage of that? So the normal productivity advice is the Pomodoro method. You work for 25 minutes and then you stop for 5 minutes and you take a rest. Then you work for 25 minutes. I'm like, what? It took me this long to start and you're going to want me to stop? And then I'm going to have to start again? That is the stupidest advice. So the beauty of this is it completely removes the friction. I don't have to go into my phone and look for a timer app. I don't have to go into the kitchen and pull the timer app. This thing sits on my desk. When I'm screwing around and I'm not starting, like when I had to write that book, I see it sitting on my desk and this is what I do. So this is a podcast. So what I'm showing is it's a bamboo cube. Unfortunately, they don't make the bamboo one anymore. They're plastic. But on 4 sides, there's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and 5 minutes. Maybe I should have started with the 5 minutes. Now, when you flip it on its head, am I on 25? No. When you flip it on its head, all you do is one motion and there is a countdown timer.
Automatically.
So yes, I don't have to set anything. And the deal that I strike with, so it starts counting down 24:50, 24:49. The deal I strike with myself is, Tracy, all you have to do is 25 minutes. If you want to stop after 25 minutes, be my guest. Do you know after 7 years, I have never stopped. And I can't figure out how my brain hasn't figured out that she's playing a trick on you. She's playing a trick on you. I know I'm playing a trick on me, but I'm telling you, it works every single time. And it's worked for everybody that I've recommended it to. So that is my best bit of advice for when you are struggling to start.
Perfect. I've written that down, Time Cube. I'll be jumping straight on Amazon and impulsive purchasing that.
Yeah. Well, because you're getting out of your head, right? It's the emotion of starting that is stopping you. And so you're getting out of your head and you're getting into action. And that is always the key with our brains, because we can sit there and mull through why we don't want to start and what we'd rather, it's ridiculous.
So
instead
true.
of just starting.
It is just refreshing even talking to you, Tracy. And I'm sure that's what women experience when they go into your community and they just hear other people talk that you relate to, that completely get, that do all the same things, that have all the same quirks and habits and just all of those patterns of behavior, that you've thought you were the only one and thought that you probably shouldn't really tell people that you don't get much done, and you probably shouldn't really tell people that because you're projecting this image of being efficient and professional and productive. And so again, there's that shame thing, right? It's like you don't want people to know that you really have trouble finishing things. But when you talk to people who get it without judgment, there's just something so validating in that and reassuring, I guess. It's just like, you feel like you can relax.
Yeah. I was just going to share something and it just went out of my brain. Oh, finishing things. Can I share that?
Yes.
Okay. I'm writing it down just because, mid sentence, I will forget what the hell I'm talking about. So just know this is like normal ADHD brain, and it gets worse as we get older. So that's the good news. But I think the intuition gets better. So it's always a balancing act. So this is what happens to a lot of ADHD women. As I said, we have all these passions. We're starting this and starting that and stopping that, and we never finish anything. So we have this mindset and this identity that I'm the kind of person who never finishes anything. Well, how does that help you? So my first comment about that is, no, you are the kind of person that got what you needed out of that thing, and then you didn't need it anymore, so you moved on. The other things, however, let's say we're talking about a house where, you walk by and the junk drawer is a mess, and then there's books all over the place, and then you had that project that you never completed. So your whole house can be, you walk in first thing in the morning into your closet and it's a disaster. So your whole house can be what I call us is 97% finishers. So you get almost to the end and then you just let it go because it's really boring. You've already done 97% of it. So we're next people, on to the next thing. So what I want you to become is a last 3% finisher. And let me tell you why. Because, for example, let's say your closet is 97% done, but you do that last 3%. You wake up in the morning and it's like, oh my gosh, I did it. So you are proud of yourself. So instead of the voice in your head saying, oh gosh, look, I still didn't do that drawer needs to be done, and never doing it, you're walking in and it's that positive emotion. It's dopamine. You're ratcheting it yourself. So then you walk into your kitchen and it's like, oh my gosh, last night I did the junk drawer and I did it 100%. So now it's not a junk drawer. So then that, also gives you dopamine. And then you walk by that project that was 97% done and you see that it's done and you're doing the same thing. So every single thing in your house that you're walking by is generating positive emotion. And that is the way that you want to start your day, because you're telling yourself, you know what? Nope, I'm 100% finisher. I'm a last 3% finisher. And that is how you actually win life with ADHD. It doesn't have to be done all at one time. The key is always you take one tiny little thing, something that the friction is so low, like, okay, I'm going to go open the junk drawer. Okay, well, once I open the junk drawer, well then, okay, I can do this little section of the junk drawer. So that's how you want to get things done, but you want to get them 100% done, because then you can use that for the rest of your day, for the rest of the week. I walk by things that I did a year ago and I'm still using them.
That's a great tip because it's swapping the dopamine that you would normally get from just going off and doing something else that looks interesting for the dopamine
Starting
of
another
just, okay,
thing.
finish. Yeah, that's right. The dopamine from starting another
Yeah.
thing. Exactly.
That you're not going to do 100%.
But on that, and I'm conscious of our time, but on that, like when getting back to that leaning in thing, like something that you just said there was so relevant. I am a person, have always been a person, I've always felt really bad about this, that I will start reading a book and 4 chapters in, I've got the gist of it. I don't need to read anymore. I got it. I don't need another 7 chapters of fluff because I get it and I'm done. But I always felt really bad that I don't finish books. I would start them but not finish them because I got the gist. And I think that leaning in thing that you mentioned, like it's like that's part of it. Like that, well, that's okay. Like I'm allowed to move on if I've got what I needed.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's being accepting of that is kind of the leaning in, isn't it? It's like that, just embracing that. That's okay.
Absolutely. And sometimes I do that too. I have so many books. It's just like, I just love books because we love
Same.
learning so much, right? But we're also like, okay, let's get to the point. Let's get to the point. I don't need to read these 50,000 stories. I just want, like you said, what are the moments that I need to know, that I need to learn from, that I can take with me? And so what I will often do, I did this recently, is I'll get through, I don't know, maybe it's a 14 chapter book and I've gotten through 7 chapters. I will then go to chat and I will say, and I tend to do that anyway. I have a book section for chat. And so I will speak into what I want to remember from each section. And then if I'm bored with the book, I will go back and say, okay, this is chapter 7 of this book. What is the gist of that? What is it? So I'll get 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever's left. And then if there's anything really interesting that it talks about, then I will go back and read that chapter. But then I take all the chapters and I'll ask it, give me 1 page. And it'll create a 1-page PDF, and it'll pull that 1 page, because I don't know about you, but I totally forget what I read.
Same.
You know, and it'll be something so brilliant that I want to remember. And then I can't remember, well, what book did it come from?
Exactly.
The other thing I love is I really started, when I really love a book, I need less so the Audible lately, but usually the Audible, the physical book, and then the Kindle, which is insanity. But I've really started, because I'm traveling more and just carrying all these books. I have a little mini iPad. And what I do is I connected my iPad, so you can highlight right in the Kindle. And then I connected it to Readwise. Readwise will pull, because once the book's done, I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? Readwise will pull everything I highlighted into all my notes, and then it'll save there so that I print them out. And I also send myself an email twice a day with all of these different highlights from all these different books I've read. So they kind of still are in my brain, because otherwise, for me, out of sight is out of mind.
Same.
Yeah.
That's genius.
I've been using Readwise. The chat thing I literally just started this year, but the Readwise thing I have been using for many years, and it costs like nothing. I think it's $8 a year, or
So this is an app, because I just recently got an iPad as well. I haven't had an iPad for years and years, but I just got an iPad. It's not the mini one. So you can download the Kindle app on that, right? So you can read books on the iPad in addition to the Kindle.
Yeah.
And so then, okay, I'm writing this down. You've got all the hacks, Tracy. Readwise. And then if I highlight, that's genius.
Yeah. It will pull the highlights, and you'll just have, and I'm trying to remember, if you go into, I haven't done this in a while, as you can tell, but I think if you go into Readwise and you click on the highlight, then you can also write notes there. And, it's really a useful way of reading. The other side to this, though, is I was reading something recently. I've been reading so much lately. And they were saying, because this is something we're anxious about. We're spending all this time reading, and what are we actually able to absorb from it? And the comment was, you know what? Who cares? You're reading for yourself, for pleasure. This is slow dopamine, right? It's not like the fast dopamine of scrolling social media where you are literally getting nothing from it. It's calming your nervous system. It's about something that you're interested in. You will absorb what you need to absorb. And so this anxiety we feel about, oh my gosh, what did I learn from it? And so what I decided is, for every book, I love this book, Brain Energy. For every book, I'll do 3 little Post-it notes, of what I got from the book, and I'll leave it in the book. And then when I recommend the book, because in my mind, like I know how much I love this book, Brain Energy, but I often forget, okay, well, what did you love about it? Like I literally
Exactly.
forget what I know.
I'm the
So,
same. It gets worse as you get older because
yeah,
I'll be recommending a book, or I'll go to tell my husband all about this book, but try to get out of my mouth what I actually
yeah,
form a coherent thought about what I actually learned. It's
right,
gone.
right.
But I know it was so good.
Because if you're like me, you have all these like little tabs, right?
Mhm.
But what does the tab do? I mean, I never go back and, so I need to consolidate everything into the short little soundbite. And then for some reason, that short soundbite triggers, I don't know, the other dendrites in my brain, right? And what else I really loved about the book. But if I don't have a way in, sounds so ridiculous. I don't remember. I know I loved it, but why?
The other thing, talking about chat, I don't know about you, but I have really found I've been really leaning into AI and automations to simplify my life.
Oh my
And
gosh.
are you the same?
I think for the ADHD brain, it is
Mm.
life changing.
Yeah.
And specifically, if you have the kind of ADHD brain that struggles to write, I am a brilliant editor, but I hate writing. And the reason I hate writing is because my brain moves so fast. I can't remember what is the main point and then what are the little points underneath. And I can't sit still long enough to even think about it. But what I can do is vomit it all in while I'm walking and then tell it to organize it for me. And that is, it also helps you process. Like if there's something
Mhm.
that's bugging you, about something that you're trying to put together and you just kind of going back and forth with it. I honestly think for the ADHD brain, AI is literally life changing. It has been for me. I feel so much more on top of things and I'm so much more prolific once it learns your voice. I fed it my book, which I guess you're not supposed to do, but I wanted to make sure that it really knew
That's a great
what my
idea. I've got
theories
3
were.
books. I should feed mine into my chat. Why haven't
Yeah.
I thought of that?
Well, you're not
Give
supposed
it
to
my
do it
books.
because then the
Oh,
whole world has it. But I'm like, well, the whole world, I mean, it's out there, right? So who
somebody else
cares?
has already done it. Meta already did it. They uploaded 70,000 books into AI. Remember they did that? But I think that you can
Uh-huh.
actually tick that you don't want it used for training or something. So,
I think you can do that with, but I don't trust it.
and I was just going to say too that I think also for me that the getting started thing, if there's something that I've got to do that just really cannot
Yeah.
get myself over that starting line, sometimes getting chat to draft me an outline or
Oh
give
my.
me like it just helps me because then my brain
Just
locks
start.
in and
Yeah.
I'm there and I'm away. So I think using those sorts of tools is just made an incredible difference to me. I'm just everything AI at the moment. And not just AI, automations too. I would say that, like in my business and my clients, I'm just going through this process. My current hyperfixation is just setting up my systems. So, like the podcast booking. So you get the reminder, you get the form. It's
Oh, yeah.
all just automatic. I don't have to go back and forth and follow up and forget that I haven't gone back to that person and forget,
Oh,
3 weeks later I haven't emailed that person. Automate as much as I possibly can and just let it be done for me so that I don't have to remember those things.
yeah. Because it's another tab, right? That's open in your
Mm,
brain. And we have this open tabs problem to begin with. So
mm,
shut
mm.
down whatever tabs you can. So then the ones that are open are actually ones that serve you.
The important ones.
Mhm.
Tracy, I'm going to let you go. I've probably got so many other questions, but I'll probably get you back on another time. But let me ask you one last question. If you can leave women listening to this who have ADHD, who think they have ADHD, what is the one message that you would
I
like to
think the
leave them
thing that
with?
I would leave with is, again, I have never met an ADHD woman that wasn't truly brilliant at something, and I feel like you owe it to yourself and you owe it to the world to figure out what does that mean for you. And I mean that sincerely. I mean, women that a society has just basically cast aside, and you start talking to them and you realize, and it never fails, all of the things they've done. But I mean, they can be working as a barista at Starbucks, barely being able to do that job. But then when you start talking to them and realize all the other things they've done, it just becomes so clear. Okay, well, this is just the wrong environment because you are on fire when you are in, that space, that sweet spot where, your values, talent, skills, passion, and purpose all convene.
I love that. Thank you, Tracy, so much for your time, and thank you for all of your work. If women want to hear more about what you do, connect with your community, or find out about your services and your support, where should they go?
The easiest thing would be for them to go to our brand new app. It's called A-OK Mind. It's A-OK, and it's on the App Store and also Google Play. And there are plenty of free resources there and just information on who we are and what we do.
Amazing. We'll absolutely put the link in the show notes and everything else that you're doing as well. Perfect.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.